Okay, great. We are live. Justin, welcome to our webinar with you, which is how to raise your first $10,000. We're here with Bill, who's working with a company or organization to make web apps accessible, if I'm getting that right. And John, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and what your project that you're working on, if anything? Okay, having a little bit of audio trouble for John, so I'm going to turn it over to Justin for the moment. And Justin, just tell us a little bit about Seconds on You and why you think this is a great starting point for a crowdfunding course.
Sure. So I'm Justin. I did the How to Break the Kickstarter Code class on CreatorUp. Basically, I've helped people raise all kinds of money. I've done over $500,000, probably over 650 or 700 grand in the last couple of years on crowdfunding. And one of the things that I think I haven't focused in enough is how to raise 10 grand. If all you need is $10,000 or $3,500 or something like that, how can you do that? And, you know, rather than showing you all the tips and tricks that it takes to raise 100 grand, which is not always easy, I want to focus on something that anyone can do, and that's raise 10 grand or less. So that's my goal here today. It's to teach you how to raise 10 grand or less.
Bill, what are you looking to raise in terms of, do you have that down yet?
Yeah, well, for this current project, I'm going for $40,000. So, what attracted to me was the topic was the first 10,000. So we got to get there before I can get to the other 30,000. However, I do have another project that I plan on working on pretty soon with a photographer, and we'll be looking to probably raise about $3,000 or $4,000.
Perfect, perfect. So yeah, I mean, one of the great things about what I'll be talking about today is it's for people who want to raise 10 grand or less, but it's also very, very helpful on how to bring in that first 10 grand. So I think it'll be helpful for both ways.
And John, let me just try an audio check on you once more.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Hey John, I can hear you.
I sure can.
Okay. Great.
So
great.
And you're telling us that you're not working on a particular project right now, but you're interested in the tools of crowdfunding. So,
exactly.
Justin, why don't we start with Bill, since he has a particular case study. He's raising 40,000. What would you recommend as a starting point for somebody like him who's just looking to get his first 25% in, which is 10,000?
Yeah. So the big key is working within your social circle. I think the idea behind this piece right here, the first 10K, is how you can raise it from family, friends, your social community, and so on, and then go from there. So the first thing I want you to think about in terms of a $40,000 raise, you need to bring in your first 25%, which is 10 grand. It's what is the easiest way to do that, and who are the most accessible people to help make that happen. So one thing I always like to think about, whether it's a small raise or a big raise, is what's the easiest, most effective way to raise that money? For instance, 10 people at $1,000 or 20 people at $500. Kind of finding that happy medium. I'm working on a big project. It's $100,000, or excuse me, I want to set a record. If I want to set a record for crowdfunding, which is $10.5 million, it's a lot easier to raise 100 grand from 150 people than $1 from 10.5 million people. So the question is what is your path to least resistance? Do you know 10 people who might be able to give up $1,000 towards this? So that's the first thing I want to think about is who are the 10 people I know that can afford $1,000 each? Or, who do I know that can give me 5 grand, and who do I know that can give me, 2, or so on and so forth. So that's the first thing I want you to think about is where can you get the bigger money from? Mostly being friends, family, and so on. Grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, best friend, business leader in your community, and so on. So building that list is really the #1 first step. It's, what is the easiest way to reach that 10 grand? To add another example, I just had a meeting with somebody who's a musician. She's a great pop singer, and she needs about $10,000 to go to Europe. And so we talked about this idea of, well, you know, what's your fan base like? And it's questionable whether she'll get a huge response to her crowdfunding campaign or not through her fan base and through press. But she knows plenty of people in the LA area. She can set up a small concert in someone's home with a lot of rich people and try and approach them that way. There's a lot of things she can do. She can reach out to family and friends. And then the next thing we'll talk about is how the bigger your team makes it easier to do that. So just to continue with that, if in her case she has a band, let's say there's 5 people in her band, well, if each person raises $2,000, next thing you know, you've got $10,000. Or if she's the leader of the band, she needs to bring in 5, and everyone else needs to bring in 1. So the whole point of this conversation, or of this introduction that I'm bringing up now, is really figuring out the path of least resistance to raising that first $10,000. What's the easiest way to do it, and with the least amount of people possible? So that's a start.
Okay, great. And my other question, Justin, is, so if people have identified, you know, their metric strategy, which is, okay, I need 20 people to give $500, and then they've identified their contact strategy, which is, these are the first 20 people that I'm going to approach. Can you then talk about how working within your network does not necessarily need to be asking your network to donate? How can you get those people who may have that amount to provide great referrals, or even to provide, you know, other potential sources of that capital? So leveraging, in other words, the connections of your own connections.
Absolutely. So number one, if you do get them to put in money, then they're more likely to want to help you out in other ways. Number two, this is career funding, is basically what it is. These people who you're reaching out to, they're helping you to fund your career in a way. So if you introduce a really, really great product or a really great pitch, if your pitch looks high quality enough, it's going to make a huge difference for you. So as an example, if I go to my uncle with a webcam video and a, all text Kickstarter page, he's not really going to care. But if I go to my uncle with an incredibly professional, very well done video, very well done page design and show him that I'm really doing something that is going to bring me further in my path, he is more likely to help fund my career and help, in any way he can. And that goes for anybody who I present this to. So one of the keys is really presenting something that looks high-end and proves that you're really doing something with your life that's worth funding. So if you can prove that to your friends, family, and so on, from there, not only are they likely to give you money to help you on your journey, but they're also probably be happy to provide you with contacts, with other sources of funding, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to you have to ask. If you don't ask, you're not going to get anything. So you have to go up to that person and say, listen, I need that $1,000. It's really important. Or, hey, I really need you to put me in contact with this person. Or, hey, I really need you to send an email out to your whole list. And you have to ask, and what you'll find is when it comes to asking people for money or for connections and such, your first 5 to 10 calls is going to be really awkward. And then after that, it gets really, really easy. As an example, Boss Tools, he raised around $60,000 to make a new shovel. It's a more ergonomic shovel. And he was stuck at about 25, 30 grand out of his $60,000 goal. And he ended up, we taught him how to make phone calls. And he ended up picking up the phone and calling everyone from family and friends. And you have no idea how many $65 shovels he sold, as well as how many $1,000 ones he sold. And it's all because he picked up the phone. And like I said, the first few calls were really awkward. After that, it got really, really easy for him. He couldn't believe it. And just to follow up even further, he didn't want to make calls at all at first. He was really, really just not confident about it. and then just over time it just became so easy for him. So one thing I can say, when you start making your calls, call the people who aren't like sure things first, or call the people who may or may not do it. That way you can get a few out of the way and you get comfortable with it and you get comfortable with the rejection. And then once you're more comfortable, start calling the people who you can get more money from. So there's some quick
great
pointers.
And I want to chime in too here with this question. So Bill is doing this not necessarily on behalf of just himself, but this larger idea. So when it's not something that is personal, it is something that you're doing more, either as a company, business, or client. How then can you engage your network in a way that does not seem to be so personal?
Sure. So for the most part, the tips I'm going to give for the 10K are going to be more on a personal level. It's much more about the personal outreach than the, trying to get a mass audience. But on a little less of a personal level, there should be an immediate set of groups that are interested in what you have to offer. For instance, if you're doing a movie about steampunk, you should be able to find steampunk groups that you can reach out to that have a bigger, kind of wider variety of an audience. In your case, maybe there's a group on LinkedIn, on Google, on Facebook, etc., as well as business alliances and so on, that are interested in accessibility for the case of Bill's project. So that would be the next step. After you've kind of exhausted your friends, family, and close community, you can start reaching out to the closed groups that are very specific to what it is you do. And I would also suggest setting up personal conversations with the individuals in those groups. This first 10K is so much more about individual interaction than it is about mass adoption. This is really about you closing the deal.
Let me also ask you about, you have really two sides to the coin. The first side is the making of the contact and the sharing of story and assets, and the second is the actual closing of that deal. So talk to me first about that story, either in a video or a personal pitch, and then let's talk about the language around closing of each individual transaction.
Absolutely. So as far as the page design itself goes, chances are you're going to get somebody to check out the page. You'll make a first call and tell them a little bit about the project and say, hey, you can check it out here. And one of the key things is, instead of saying go to kickstarter.com/so-so-so-and-so, or go to Kickstarter and search this, have a website that points you to that Kickstarter page, so it's real easy. For instance, getstuckintheaters.com took us to one page. We had a Kickstarter page for Space Command, spacecommandmovie.com took us to the Space Command Kickstarter page. So get on the phone or email the person, say, hey, visit this website. It'll take you to our Kickstarter page. And from there, watch the video and look at the page. Once you know if they've done that, then you can then get back on the phone and talk to them in depth about how they can, about which reward you think fits them best, and you can do your convincing. One of the nice things about Indiegogo versus Kickstarter, on Indiegogo you don't need a profile in order to make a donation or a pledge. So you can actually take someone's credit card over the phone and fill it out on the Indiegogo page for them, which is one of the better ways of doing it. It's like, hey Bill, I'm funding this project. I really need your help. I know you're good for $100. Just give me your credit card and I'll plug it in. Just tell me what it is over the phone. And what you'll find is a lot of your friends don't even care what you're doing. If you tell them you need $100 to help you on a project, they might just be willing to do it. And what you'll find further is that most people are too lazy to do it on their own. Getting someone to the page is one thing. Getting them to actually fill out a whole credit card form, it's a little bit harder. So if you can do it for them, if you're using a platform that lets you fill out the credit card form for them, it makes it a little bit easier too. And once again, getting back to the page design, make sure the page design looks really, really good. And make sure that they can scroll from the top of the page to the bottom of the page and understand what you're doing just through the visuals alone. whatever you do, do not just do a video and text. Make sure that there's graphics that drive you down the page.
Cool. Let me open it up to a few more questions here, if there are. I see Susan has joined. Welcome, Susan. I'm not sure if your audio is on. If you have questions, I'd like to really open it up to everyone here.
Okay, I'm just getting acclimated.
Welcome, Susan.
No problem.
Hi.
So, Justin, one of the things that I think is interesting here is that, you know, on the one hand, you're talking about the pitch, which is the project, the idea, the story, and on the other hand, you're talking about the pragmatic, practical, this is how you get the money. And it's interesting for me to hear that in some cases the practical is just as important, if not more, than just the pitch. So can you talk about, you know, you've already mentioned taking down the numbers in terms of the credit cards stuff, but how can you do this in a short amount of time? Let's talk about scheduling. Let's talk if it should be an event, and or how would you manage yourself if you were the only one running this campaign?
Sure. Interesting question. So, I mean, as far as scheduling goes, you know when you're going to launch the project in most cases. Usually I suggest about a month of prep, 1 to 2 months of prep minimum. But that's usually for a bigger project. If we're talking about a $10,000 project, you know, you need enough time to put everything together and build your lists. So as far as scheduling goes, I think the first thing you want to schedule is time to build your lists. You want to build a list of the people who you need to email and your email addresses. You want to build a list of the people who are most likely to give you larger amounts of money, and then the people who you know that are most likely to give you less amount of money. And you're going to build a spreadsheet that basically lists the people in order of importance based on how much money you think they're good to give you. Now, you building a list on your own is going to be a nice big list, and you'll be amazed at all the people you know who are most likely going to be able to donate to your project. But then the more people on your team, the more, you know, getting them to build that list as well, all of a sudden you have 5 times as many people. So list building is the first piece that goes into your scheduling, and that happens before you launch your project. The second thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pick out who your most likely people are to donate, the people who are no-brainers, and you want to get them to commit before you launch your project. And I think that's really a big piece too, is knowing that you're going to get 10 to 30% of your goal already funded before you launch. You know for a fact that on day one that they are going to put the money in. And that's really important. And the reason that that's important is that when you launch your campaign and people see that it's only 5% funded, they're not really going to take the time to add more money into it. But if they see you're 30% there, or you're 40% there, or you're 50% there, they know that you're going somewhere with this, and they're more likely to take the time to do it. So that's your first most important thing, is the early money, getting people committed ahead of time. And then, as soon as you launch, during those first 3-4 days, you should have 2 hours a day at least set aside for phone calls. And just call your friends, family, and so on. You know, go down that list that you built and make sure that you talk to each person and you put a little note next to them that says, you know, what they said, when they're going to donate if they're not going to do it today, when you need to call back, and so on. And I think, you know, staying organized, setting aside time to do your phone calls and to reach out, and to set up your lunch appointments with the person who's more likely to give you $1,000 to $5,000. All that stuff, I think it's scheduling is super important, and that's a good way to go about it. You know, it doesn't all need to be done on the phone. You can have an event where you know you're going to see everyone. Maybe it's your cousin's bar mitzvah or wedding or something like that, and you show up and everyone's asking you what you do, and you tell them, hey, I'm working on this project. You tell them about it, and then, hey, can I call you tomorrow? or you take people out to lunch. Hey, you know, Grandma, can I take you out to lunch? I want to tell you all about this project and I need your help with it. Things like that. Those are some of the types of ways that you can go about, you know, working these things into your schedule and some of the types of appointments and things like that that you can make.
Justin, I'm going to jump in here and try and think about some ways to make this more efficient. So, for example, with the list building, instead of just brainstorming, what about exporting your LinkedIn, you know, emails or your Facebook? I mean, how can you do that with the existing tools?
Absolutely. So one really good tool is exporting your Google email addresses. To be honest, I think that stuff gets a little bit further into the next level of funding. We can talk about some tips and tricks a little bit, but the biggest thing that I would say is when you're writing an email, write it as if you're writing to your best friend. Don't worry about making like this big graphic newsletter. Write a short 1 to 2 paragraphs that says, hey, you know, so-and-so, I hope you're doing great. I wanted to tell you about this project that I'm doing. It would mean the world to me if you could put in some money. Here's the link, and, you know, let's chat sometime soon so I can tell you more about it. Just a short text-based email makes a big difference. You don't need to send newsletters. There's all kinds of little hacks and stuff that you can do to pull email lists from LinkedIn or from Google or Gmail and so on. But I think I would rather save some of that hacking stuff for more of a, you know, a show and tell type of thing.
Okay, so Justin, what I'm hearing is a really simple plan, not a complicated plan. You are expressing to people that they should get their pitch down to their network and then follow up with that network in a personal way, and that may mean a donation from that person or a donation from somebody they know who is excited about it. So it's really about honing that first 30%, 40% to get the rest of it. I am going to open up the last part of this webinar to any other questions that people have. I know that Susan and John are really here to listen. Bill, you may have a few more specific questions. David, if you have any questions, please feel free to chat them in the box here. So, Bill, anything that we've left out here that you'd like to see covered?
So back to the sort of the idea of, I guess sort of like getting people ready to donate. You know, I guess maybe you call them, you email. So what's the process that you do, you know, and how soon before the campaign do you say, hey, we're going to launch this campaign on day X? You know, what do I need to do to be ready and to make sure that then on day 1 that they can donate?
Sure, that's actually a perfect question. With Mark Zickery, Mark was talking about it for months before he launched his campaign. He hosts these events called The Table, where a bunch of people in the film industry get together and talk about, you know, what they're going through in the industry and what their projects are and if they're having any issues, kind of like a support group for film. And literally for months ahead of time, Mark was saying, hey, I'm working on this Kickstarter project. You know, if anyone knows anything about Kickstarter, if anyone has any ideas, anyone wants to be involved, let me know. And he would give progress updates each time he would see us. And he was doing the same thing for people he'd run into in the streets. Grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, family, friends, all that stuff. He was always talking that he's getting ready to launch this campaign. And what happened was, once he did, people had already known it was coming and they were waiting for it. So the big thing I would do is, as soon as you know you want to do a campaign, start opening your mouth about it. Start telling people, hey, I'm working on this. Hey, I'm working on this. Hey, what do you think of Kickstarter? Hey, what do you think of my idea? That way, they're already familiar with what you're doing. They already know that at some point in the future you're going to ask for money. And then as you get closer, you can say, hey, we're only a week away, or we're only a month away, or hey, we're 5 days away. Or hey, you know, you're going to be there for me right on June 1st. So you're going to go from this kind of mass level of, hey, I'm working on this cool project, and hey, I'm thinking it's Kickstarter, to hey, we're launching Kickstarter on this date, to hey, it's a couple days before, to hey, it's now. And now that you've known about it for a long time, now's the day you can finally put in money. I know you've been waiting.
Okay, I like that strategy. I was just going to make a suggestion to go, you know, a month ahead of time, you're giving people the heads up. 2 weeks ahead of time, you're giving people the hey, it's coming, and then the day of, it's not a prize, and they feel more ready to give. You're greasing the wheels.
Absolutely. And I've seen it where we've launched a campaign without anyone knowing it. One person I know had 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and he said, you know what, my fans, they don't need to know a thing ahead of time. We're just going to launch it, and that's it. And it actually didn't do as well as it would have had he been talking about it and been asking for, you know, feedback and advice and really told people in advance, because it dropped, and then people had to scramble to put together money and so on. So getting people ready to give you the money makes a big difference. You know, for instance, my mom might be good for the first $1,000 on a campaign that I do, you know. But if I tell her that I just launched it and I need $1,000 today, that's pretty hard. If I say, hey, Mom, you know, get ready because in a month or two I'm going to launch this campaign and I really want you to be the first person in, that gives her time to prepare and get her, you know, finances in order. And that goes for everyone, you know.
So I got a question. So the page is all set up on Kickstarter. It's ready to go. They've approved it. I haven't launched it yet. What I want to know is, should I send the preview link out to everybody? Because like you said with Kickstarter, you know, they have to have an account. So could I send that link out to a whole bunch of people, even though it's just a preview, and that way they can sign up there, get their Kickstarter account in place? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of a yes and no. I wouldn't send people the preview unless you're really discussing it in depth with them. Okay. What I'd rather see you do is send them a little PowerPoint presentation that tells them about your product, okay, or a flyer or something. Because what'll happen is if they see your Kickstarter page, they might think of it like, oh, I've already been there, I've already done that by the time it comes out live. So if you give them other material in advance to familiarize them with your project, and you tell them that you're going to raise a certain amount, and then you send them the live page once they can actually donate, I think it's better to drive them to Kickstarter when they can actually donate. However, the people who are going to give you feedback and who really want to be involved, those are the people who I would show the preview page to. Okay. So there's two types of people. There's the people who really want to give you all their feedback and be involved, show them the preview, and then the people who just want to see it and then donate, or who don't have that much time to give you feedback. Those are the people you're going to send a quick PDF to, and then take them to the page once it's live.
Okay.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the rest of the group? We got everyone's answer. John, Susan, David. Okay. Well, Justin, I think this has been a great primer for your course, and I certainly think people have a toolkit here, both with their phone and with their ability to type in credit cards to get enough people. Ideally, you know, what do they need? 20 to give 500 or less.
Absolutely. You know, the biggest thing I would say is think about your path to least resistance. What is the easiest way to raise the most amount of money from the least amount of people, and who are those people that you can do it with? And then really work on your skills in terms of asking, proving that it's a worthwhile project, and then closing the deal, getting that credit card in the system. And don't be afraid to take cash or checks or anything like that. Some people aren't comfortable putting in their credit card online, so you know, take the money however you can get it. If you really wanted to show up and you're, you know, in the Kickstarter goal area that shows how much you've raised, then take that cash or that check and put it onto a Visa card, and then put it in the system. You know, but don't be afraid to take money by any means. And like I said, ask the question. You know, build your list of who you want to talk to. Work on how well you ask it. Prove to them that it's really, really a worthwhile project, and then make sure that you can close that deal. And if you do those things, I think you're gonna see how easy it is to raise 10 grand in a very short amount of time.
Great. Well, thank you, Justin, so much for taking the time to join us. For everyone who's here and who's watching, I highly suggest you take Justin's course for just 30, the best investment you've ever made. It's available through creatorup.com, and just also available for personal coaching and consultation. So feel free to reach out to us at Mike@CreatorUp, and be happy to connect you directly with Justin. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm going to stop the broadcast here and end the hangout. And best of luck with your crowdfunding campaigns and reaching your first 10K.